Here we go.
Congressman Santos, do you plan to resign? Are you going to run for re-election?
It's just the name of the game that is politics.
Can we talk about that? Make some space, and then we'll address.
If I had to describe George Santos, would be a charismatic liar.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm?
Do you have any statements here?
Do you have anything to say?
Explain what happened here.
I'm not going to discuss an ongoing investigation.
Support and defend the Constitution
Anything about the money, the investigation?
I have no comments for you at the
of the
moment.
United States against all enemies.
George Santos is a con artist.
He's been lying about pretty much everything.
I had no idea that he was a total fraud.
So help you God.
It's the greatest fiction in the history of congressional politics.
Nonsense. It's all a lie.
Santos has got to be expelled.
He was elected under false pretenses.
How dare you lie to this community?
Do you feel like you're qualified to serve in this Congress?
There should be a law against a criminal serving in an elected office.
It's really quite disgraceful.
He should step down.
How can he be trusted to be a lawmaker when he breaks the law?
Did you raise money for a puppy?
He allowed my dog to die. He's a horrible, evil person.
Where does this end? How much is actually tied up with this? That is sort of what it's been like reporting on George Santos.
I've been in politics over 50 years. I've never seen a story ending like Santos.
There's nobody who is this off.
We have an indictment. It's a witch hunt.
The very first day that I met him, he was very charismatic, very friendly. He was very friendly with everyone. I was 21 at the time. He was 22, 23.
I met him with the name Anthony because that's what his family called him.
Right off the bat, I noticed he was kind of fabricating like his life, that he was somebody that came from a privileged background, with family that had money, with family that had expensive property.
A minha primeira impressão foi a melhor possível. Nós sempre nos demos muito bem, ele era uma pessoa alegre, Anthony era sonhador, muito sonhador. Dentro dos sonhos dele existia sempre tudo com muito luxo, porque ele era uma pessoa que ele gostava de luxo.
He would lie to me that he was working as a reporter, that he was working as a freelancer, as a model, or doing some other jobs that it's not the case, and they could clearly see that he didn't have any job at all.
Somebody that's 22, 23 years old that has all these properties with his family is not going to go work at a call center in the middle of nowhere, Queens, for $12 an hour.
I didn't actually ask him personally how much money he had in his account, but of course I could definitely see that they were struggling to pay rent. At some point, they even allowed the internet to be cut for non-payment.
Ele mentiu para mim quando ele pegou o meu CPF, usou para comprar uma joia para a irmã dele. Ele jurou até o fim que ele tinha pago os boletos e ele não pagou.
There was one person where he did tell them that he never graduated. He said, he got a GED.
I told him that my cousin was studying at Baruch College. And then that's when he said, oh, I graduated from Baruch College.
I first met Santos almost exactly 3 years ago. Right from the start, I thought he was a weirdo. I thought he was a liar. Nothing fit in the way he described himself. He claimed he was a 31-year-old, successful multimillionaire with extensive finance connections in Brazil. Said he was Catholic, he had a cross on his neck. A year or two later, when he started calling himself Jewish.
Well, Jewish lasers in space. I'm a Jew, trust me.
I knew he was lying, because I had already asked him those questions.
There's that scene, I think, in The Godfather where Vito Corleone sort of says to Michael,
Senator Corleone.
I always dreamed of you being a Senator Corleone or Governor Corleone. I think that really speaks to the fact that political office, political power is the ultimate kind of validation. And that is something that a George Santos knows he can offer people because he seemed like such a well-tailored candidate who checked so many boxes.
He's like an Etch-a-Sketch, constantly reinventing himself. He has multiple names and multiple personalities, right? There's George Santos, the congressman. There's George DeVolder, the businessman. There's Anthony DeVolder, the LGBTQ MAGA activist. There's Tiara, the drag queen. There's Jewish descendant of Holocaust survivors. He has an infinite stream of identities. It's just strange.
When I met him, he came off as somewhat sophisticated. He told me he was highly successful. He wanted to run. He said that he wanted to represent the people of the district, understood the needs of the people.
George Santos here, Republican candidate for New York's 3rd Congressional District.
2020, Tom Suozzi's going to run again. It's a strong Democrat district. People were not saying we want to run. We really didn't have anyone in Nassau. At the time, the district went from Queens through Nassau, the North Shore, into Suffolk County. George Santos comes from Queens. He comes out, and we meet him.
I am a first-generation born American, a gay man, and a Republican.
He answered questions. He submitted a resume. He interviewed. Based upon that information, he became the candidate.
A potential upset on the North Shore of Long Island. Republican George Santos is now leading Democratic Congressman Tom Suozzi.
2020, there were a lot of absentee paper ballots.
None of these races has been called because of those absentee ballots.
On Election Day, he won the machine vote by a couple of thousand votes, but there were still 100,000 votes to be counted.
The fact that I closed ahead of a sitting congressman, that speaks volumes.
He immediately proclaimed victory, and he went down to freshman orientation in Washington, D.C.
I attended freshman orientation.
Hello, everyone. I'm Congressman-elect Richie Torres.
And he approached me and said, even though you're a Democrat and I'm Republican, we're both gay, and I hope we can work together. And I just found it to be so strange that I said, sure, and then I left.
Everyone in the world knew that he was going to lose overwhelmingly.
Also in Long Island, Democrat Thomas Suozzi has won his re-election bid for New York's 3rd Congressional District.
And when the final results came in 3 weeks later, he didn't just lose, he lost by 15 points, and he lost by 60,000 votes. He then decided he wanted to run again and declared immediately. And then he got weirder and weirder. He would brag wildly about his Maseratis, about his mansions, none of which existed.
I have the business background, I have the acumen. I think this is a great time for Americans to know I'm a gay Republican. My party overwhelmingly supports me. I want to fight for common sense and safety for our communities. Very nice to meet you, man. I'm George Santos, by the way. I'm running for U.S. Congress, and I'm focused on winning and delivering results.
But after he got the nomination, the New York Court of Appeals changed the district lines and made it much more winnable for a Republican. And he was there. We were stuck with him.
The lines changed the district dramatically. Still has Nassau and Queens, but instead of going over the water through the Bronx, which is heavily, heavily Democrat, it now comes down from the North Shore through Levittown and Massapequa, both Republican communities. So now the district becomes winnable.
There were so many races going on in Nassau County. So George Santos was the least of our concerns.
I will think about that every day of my life. Our election, like all the elections in New York, were drowned out by the governor's race.
When you're looking at the total picture of the last election in New York, it's very hard to see George Santos being in Congress right now if Lee Zeldin were not at the top of the ticket and performing so well on Long Island, and Kathy Hochul doing pretty poorly. That was, I think, the determining factor more than anything else.
We hit him very hard on the opposition research we could prove.
He can say and mislead the audience and everybody watching at home to whatever he wants. At the end of the day, I stand proud in my record.
Despite the fact George Santos lied about it, he was at the insurrection January 6th.
I was at the Ellipse on January 6th.
We're going to walk down to the Capitol.
And the president was at his full awesomeness that day.
Even though he tried to lie about it in the campaign, insurrectionists raided the Capitol, and George Santos tragically was there.
The misleading things he keeps saying about me that I did or did not do, or the locations I've been or I've been not.
He compared abortion to slavery.
When we look at the American past and we look at slavery, we think it was barbaric. We aborted our own? That is barbaric.
We raised the alarm as loud as we could.
So there was a post where he was sharing a GoFundMe about a dog that had a tumor, and he was asking people to donate.
A disabled U.S. Navy veteran whose service dog needed emergency surgery.
She was my little Sapphire. She was a little red pit bull, and she was about 8 or 10 weeks old, I think, when I got her. And I was homeless at the time, and I had really bad depression. Whenever I'd start getting really manic, she would just be all over me. I couldn't ignore her. She'd climb on me, lick my face. She was my little buddy. And that was a time when I actually noticed that she was starting to get that growth, getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So I took her in, and the vet tech probably saw my face just drop when I heard $3,000. And she pulled me aside after the vet left the office, and she said, I know this guy who does charities, and I'll talk to this guy, Anthony, that I know, Anthony DeVolder, and he's really good at it, and due to his network, there's gonna be a lot of people willing to help you. He'll set up a GoFundMe, and hopefully within a couple of months, we'll have this $3,000, and we'll be able to get the surgery taken care of. Should be no problem. Within a couple of months, I think it was 3 months, we actually had the whole $3,000. The money never came through. I should have known at the time, but I was desperate. It was horrible. I couldn't do anything for her. And the one day that she just refused to get up and move anymore, to go outside, and I knew I had to take her in to have her put down, I was screaming at the top of my lungs like a banshee, just wailing with the pain.
It breaks my heart because this is somebody that fought for our country, and he already was suffering from PTSD, and then to lose his dog was just too much.
He helped with the fundraising. He used Ostov and his service dog as a vehicle to attract charitable contributions, and then Santos stole all the money, cut off all communications, and disappeared.
In a tweet today, Santos denied stealing the cash, but Ostov says he never got that money.
Election day in America, and the stakes for the 2022 midterms could hardly be any higher.
Make sure you vote for that good-looking guy, George Santos.
New York became an unlikely battleground.
Republican George Santos defeated Democrat Robert Zimmerman.
I want to make sure you all know that now you have a man of the people who will represent the people in Washington, D.C. and end the nonsense.
He's a serial liar. People in the 3rd Congressional District didn't elect George Santos. They elected a fictional character. George Santos isn't at all what he claimed to be or said that he was.
An investigation by the New York Times claims the resume of Republican Congressman-elect George Santos is largely fabricated.
Did you graduate from Baruch? Did you graduate from there?
Yeah.
So did I.
I did.
Claims that suggest much of his resume, including where he went to college, where he worked, are entirely made up.
Did I embellish my resume? Yes, I did. And I'm sorry.
Do you have any statements here? Do you have anything to say to your colleagues?
Explain what happened here.
I was not shocked because even back then, everything seemed fabricated. It seemed like he was playing a character.
We need Anthony DeVolder. Sorry, what's his name again?
What we had said about him being a fraud and a fabulist and a pathological liar, all that proved to be true. But I tell you, I was also astonished at how much more there was.
Citigroup and Goldman Sachs say they have no record of him working there.
I didn't outright lie about my work experience.
He was calling people in Nassau County, saying his story is totally a fraud. He wanted a lawyer to sue the Times for libel. It's totally untrue. There's nothing to it. Very emphatic, very angry.
Now everything that I've ever worked to build on is up in questioning, and that's the very frustrating side.
I said, what's going on? He said, it's all going to be straightened out tomorrow. It's just, they're out to get me. I said, well, what about your college diploma? You have a copy of your diploma? He said, you know what happened? They called Baruch, and I was known as George DeVolder, and they asked for George Santos. He said, it'll be straightened out. I'll have a copy of it. I'll get it to you tomorrow. I said, okay. I'll wait to hear from you. I haven't spoken to him since.
Do I wish you a happy Hanukkah or a Merry Christmas?
I'm Catholic, but I'm also Jew-ish, as in ish.
He appeared at menorah lightings the day before the New York Times report came out. There were people at those menorah lightings whose families had been slaughtered, dead in the Holocaust. And he's conning them and using them, and he went to them for money and support.
My mom was a 9/11 survivor. She was in the South Tower, and she made it out.
9/11 claimed my mother's life, tweeted George Santos in July of 21. New immigration records obtained by ABC News prove that on 9/11, Santos's mother, Fatima DeVolder, wasn't even in the United States.
Was your mother in the World Trade Center on 9/11? Was she?
The sheer depth and breadth of his deception is unprecedented. We've never seen a candidate or a congressman quite like George Santos.
New York Republicans are calling you a disgrace. You will not resign?
I am calling for his immediate resignation.
Resign.
We must call for the resignation of Congressman George Santos.
Resign.
Steps down.
Step aside.
He should resign.
This joke's gotta go.
Congressman Santos, will you resign?
I will not.
It's Shantae Lands with Channel 7. I just wanted to know if there was anything you had to say. I first started covering George Santos on December 17th, but the first time I actually met him was on Capitol Hill. Anything to the voters at all that you might want to say? Just until I was sent there to try to get answers about the, at the time, alleged lies that he may have told to his hundreds of thousands of constituents.
New York free, Santos free.
Right now, a group of Long Islanders are on a bus headed to D.C.
They organized a trip to confront him.
This is a national issue.
So if we're not doing this kind of outreach, he will stay there.
They invited me to go, and I rode on the bus with them. They were pretty fired up.
How dare you lie to this community? How dare you fabricate your resume to get elected to Congress? How dare you offend our democracy?
When we arrived, we went to his office.
Where are you, George? We all sent emails and nobody got a response, and he's not here to meet with us.
His Vish answered the door and said that he was not available.
Does he have an office or does he have a hideout? What is going on here?
If you are a representative, where are you?
We then went to House Speaker Kevin McCarthy.
We are all so frustrated at the fact that he has not acted.
What are the charges against him?
Well, I mean,
is there a charge against him? You know, in America today, you're innocent until proven guilty.
Despite all the crimes that have been documented, despite all the lies he's acknowledged, no Republican leadership in the House has called for his removal.
You know, I find it outrageous that a federal candidate for public office, for congressional office, can win a congressional seat under fundamentally fraudulent pretenses without facing legal consequences. I partnered with Congressman Dan Goldman to file an ethics complaint that has led to the ethics investigation against George Santos. And we hand-delivered the complaint, and we saw him briefly, and he just directed us to leave the complaint at the front desk.
The embattled congressman from Long Island is tonight stepping down from his committee assignments.
Nobody pressured me to do absolutely anything. I think it was an appropriate decision that until he can clear everything up, he's off committees right now.
We just got out of conference, and George has voluntarily removed himself from committees as he goes through this process.
The fact that George Santos stepped down from his committees after meeting with Kevin McCarthy is an admission of guilt. And so I have a simple question for House Republicans. If he's too compromised and corrupt to be a member of a congressional committee, then it logically follows that he's too corrupt to be a member of Congress.
Try to stick by the Constitution. The voters elected him to serve. If there is a concern and he has to go through the ethics, we'll let him move through that.
That motivated me to introduce the Santos Act, the Stop Another Non-Truthful Office Seeker Act, which would require federal candidates to certify under oath, under the penalty of perjury, in writing, their employment, military, and educational backgrounds, so that candidates who do lie can finally be held accountable.
Have you supplied any information, sir?
And right now we've got breaking news surrounding embattled Congressman George Santos from New York. He is now facing federal charges.
He has been facing a slew of investigations ranging from campaign finance violations to lying.
Prosecutors have unearthed evidence of potential federal crimes, and the congressman has a date in court as early as tomorrow.
It was packed, mostly journalists. We waited for him to come in. This is the first time I've seen him look concerned, nervous, and overwhelmed. And then he sat down, he said a lot of yes ma'ams to the judge, who just asked him, if he understood his rights. He ultimately pleaded not guilty to the 13 charges.
Santos was released on $500,000 bond.
Santos is facing a total of 13 federal charges, including
donor fraud, unemployment fraud, and misleading the House of Representatives. When Congressman Santos came out of court, that's when the chaos really started.
Are you going to run for re-election?
Are you considering resigning? I remember at one point saying, if you don't give me space, I'm not going to do this.
Everyone, look, if you guys don't behave, there's no way you're going to get information back to the people. So make some space, and then we'll address.
We make our way to the podium.
This is the beginning of the ability for me to address and defend myself. We have an indictment, and I'm going to comply. I've been complying throughout this entire process. The reality is it's a witch hunt.
This is a guy who had nothing, no asset over $5,000 just 18 months earlier.
$750,000. They said that you reported that wrongly. Do you have any comment to that?
Well, like I said, I will be giving them all, will be delivering all the finances of my company. I'm delivering all my finances to them to dispel their accusation against me.
We called it out in the North Shore Leader newspaper and let people know this is what we've said.
Santos, like all candidates, we try to run a little bit of background on, particularly the campaign finance section.
Mr. Santos either illegally coordinated with an independent expenditure or he illegally received a campaign contribution.
Some of the interesting things that came out was he would spend a lot of money at one restaurant, pay himself and his sister through his PACs.
The funds came legitimately to me via my my company.
His PAC was paying his landlord the exact amount for his rent.
I did my work where I earn my living, how I pay my bills.
Politicians often, you will find, have a hard time making an honest living and finding regular work. It's sort of why they're politicians.
This has been blown out of proportion because of reporters from organizations like the Daily Beast who like to create this kind of rhetoric.
What we can certainly say about George Santos is that he's a liar.
Remember, these are allegations that the federal government's putting forward. So right now, he is still innocent until he's proven guilty.
And again, you will not resign.
I will not resign.
He should resign. I've said that repeatedly, and obviously these charges confirm what I've said from the beginning.
There's a clock ticking, and George Santos should have resigned in December. He should have resigned in January. He should have resigned yesterday, and maybe he'll resign today.
All of his Long Island Republican colleagues, all of them have came out vocally and said, Congressman Santos should step down.
Breaking news out of Washington, D.C., where a resolution has just been introduced to expel Congressman George Santos from office.
My intent to raise a question of the privileges of the House. Representative George Santos be, and he hereby is, expelled from the House of Representatives.
This is actually the second time Garcia has made a motion like this.
Now is the appropriate time to make sure that Republicans are on record if they're going to actually stand by someone that is a serial liar and a fraud.
It has to end bad for him. It's a question of how bad. His campaign finance reports are wrong. That is enough to make findings against him and recommend that he be removed from Congress. The sooner he goes, the better it is for everybody.
By winning the seat, George Santos made it almost inevitable that this entire fabrication he created about his life was going to just completely crumble. And it's almost an act of self-destruction to run a successful congressional campaign as essentially a made-up person.
He has no choice but to resign because his ability to govern has been completely crippled by a collapse of credibility. He has no credibility with his constituents. He has no credibility with his colleagues. The majority of his constituents, including Republicans, want him to resign. The majority of Republicans in the New York delegation have called upon him to resign. He's utterly useless, and he should resign and create space for a more effective congressperson to take over.
Did we make a mistake? Of course we made a mistake. The party made a mistake. I made a mistake. I take full responsibility. He was a candidate based upon what we knew about him, but it was all based on lies, unfortunately, and on his resume. And would we have checked? Should we and would we are two different things. In retrospect, of course, we should have looked more deeply into it.
These campaign stories tell far more about the candidates than any political statements that they can make. Because at the end of the day, money talks in this country, and especially in the local sides of it, where the money can be quite low to win these races. You don't have to meet the bar of expectation that you would have someone be fully backgrounded, that you can get another George Santos in almost any district outside of a major city is possible still.
We need, as a people, to be more civically engaged, to open our eyes and actually pay attention. And also when we see something like a George Santos, to call it out.
George Santos, are you a part of his re-election campaign?
No, I am not.
Right.
No,
So
he shouldn't run for
have you done
re-election.
anything for that seat to try to get a Republican in?
Oh, we're gonna keep that seat with another Republican. Yes, we are.
Do I think Congressman George Santos will run again? You can never tell. I have no idea. I don't try to predict what that man is going to do.
It's a beautiful day here in Washington, D.C. It's a great day to be an American. It's a great day to be a Republican, and it's a great day to announce re-election.